be a lot of information coming your way, and we obviously have that available for you later on as well. So let me go back to my screen. Here you are. And so you can see me for a little bit longer. Jacqueline, I will go back to the slides, but I just want to see you and see that you're there, your smiling face. I'll hand over to you, and I'll put the presentation slides back up, Jacqueline. So when you talk, I'll just go through the slides, yeah?
Sure, thank you very much, Arjan. A warm welcome also from my side. We are really very happy, yeah, I would say even delighted to have so many participants joining us today for this first masterclass session. So welcome to our masterclass. Arjan mentioned already, my name is Jacqueline Jaspert. I'm the team leader of the EU for Innovation project, and I would like to give you a very brief overview of our project with a specific focus on those interventions that are relevant for universities and that we implement also together with Albanian universities. So our project, EU for Innovation, is funded by the European Union, as the title suggests already, and it is our objective or our mission to improve the innovation and startup ecosystem in Albania and to boost the creation of startups. We provide different kinds of support. We provide capacity development support, meaning expertise, workshop trainings, coaching, mentoring. We provide linkages for the stakeholders of the Albanian ecosystem, being it internationally or also nationally. And we provide access to finance through a so-called Innovation Challenge Fund that is implemented by the Swedish Embassy in Tirana. So having said this, it is of utmost importance for us to support the entire system, the so-called innovation and startup ecosystem. And maybe you could go to the next slide, Arjan. And as you can see, this ecosystem consists of different stakeholders, institutions and organizations. You can see private sector, of course, playing a major role. That does not even, I mean, this is, of course, all the startups or aspiring entrepreneurs, but also corporates that are part of this ecosystem. But of course, also institutions and organizations that provide services to startups, like incubation program, acceleration programs, or co-working spaces. Media and of course also financial organizations, they can be public or private, play a very important role, and of course government, as government institutions lay the framework conditions for this ecosystem to flourish and to grow. And in some cases also development organizations, like in our case European Union, provide support for the ecosystem. But one stakeholder, one actor that is actually also crucial are the universities, and we consider university as a very important implementing partner for our project because we see universities not only as providing the talent base for this startup and ecosystem, but also as a provider of research, of innovation, and as a very important player also in cooperation with the other players of this ecosystem. So therefore we have a number of interventions that we support and that we implement with universities under this EU for Innovation project. The first intervention, and these interventions are separate. So some universities are participating just in one intervention. Some Albanian universities are even participating in all three interventions. The first intervention is the Masterclass series. This is actually our intervention or the event we are having today. And we also had another Masterclass series in the past on entrepreneurial universities. Another intervention we are implementing also together with our partners, and I would say friends from Preneurz, is the Tirana Inc. It's a multi-university incubation program, bringing different universities in Tirana together and providing support for aspiring entrepreneurs, for student teams to establish their startups or to further develop a business model. This intervention or incubation program will also kick off very soon, most probably during the first quarter of this year. And then as a third intervention, we have the Connect IT program that is basically a digital workspace where Albanian IT students work to solve IT challenges of Albanian SMEs. And here Albanian students have the capacities and the possibility to actually show their capacities and their knowledge. They can provide solutions, digital solutions for Albanian companies. They can implement these solutions, and they can also maintain the process, or they can maintain these solutions that they previously developed. So this is also a relatively new project, currently in a pilot phase, but also very promising. So this is just to give you a very brief overview of what we do with regards to universities. And thank you also for sharing the last slide, Ayan. If you have any questions regarding these interventions, yeah, you know where to find us.
I'll bring that back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'll put up the contact details a bit later because I go back to the presentation. Sure. But thank you very much, Jacqueline, for this introduction, and it gives a bit of clarity on where we start, because obviously this is not really the starting point also for Preneurz, as we have been involved in last year's program as well. There was a masterclass series as well, but more broadly on a few different topics. So this is a continuation of that, and some of you were obviously familiar with the program last year, but not everyone is. So I'll bring you back to the presentation right now, and these are the contact details again. You probably see that, right? Yep. And today's topic is around entrepreneurship education. So for all of you that still remember the last year's program, there's 3 levels for us in the Entrepreneurial University, as we call it. And the bottom 2 levels are really around student activation. So having students explore and being inspired by entrepreneurship. The level 2 is around more education, formal educational programs, and really to pursue people to start thinking seriously about starting a venture. And the last level, level 3, is to launch and grow a company, which usually happens in university incubators, and a lot of programs for that. So Tirana Inc. is particularly focused on that last level, but today we'll be focusing on the first 2 levels. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and this will allow us to go back into the session and hand over to Bart Sutorius, who heads up this particular masterclass series and the program for entrepreneurship education. So there you go, Bart. You got to off mute, Bart.
That was a beginner's mistake. I was on mute. Someone must be on mute, I would say. Well, I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very glad you are here. And I worked before with Ayan and Eric, and I would like to share some sheets with you to do a short introduction on the program. So this is I would say they call it the expert team. That's us. Ayan, you just met. Quite a few in the audience already know him probably. But we have still a lot of new faces. Eric Boer, you will meet later. He will moderate the Q&A with the speakers. Ayan and Eric are both co-founders of Preneurz.Amsterdam. They stimulate entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial universities from that company. We work together several times, also internationally. So they hired me. As you can see, I'm a lecturer and trainer and coach in entrepreneurship at several universities in Amsterdam. I met Eric many years ago when he was the director of the Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship, and he was until 2020. Okay, enough about us. Let's go to the program. It's all about entrepreneurship education, and well, to our humble opinion, we see 3 basic principles that we really like about entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial education, and we would like to share that with you during the whole program. The 3 principles boil down to learning by doing, so activating students, action learning it's also called. So not only the books, of course, but really go out there and go out of the comfort zone. Talk to people you, instead of students or professors, to maybe real life entrepreneurs, or maybe to customers, or maybe to key partners in business or whatever. So get out of the comfort zone. The students must go out of the comfort zone here, and reflection on action. That's the third principle. You think about what you are doing, you think about your competencies and skills, and not only individually, but you might also do that in a team. And in education, that would mean that you would have some coaching or mentoring to also reflect on your actions or your team actions. So if you look at the program, you probably all have seen, of course, the flyer, so I will be very short. We have today we start off with a masterclass, the first masterclass, with two main subjects: the entrepreneurial education at universities, that will be tackled by our first speaker, and then train entrepreneurial behavior that will be addressed by our second speaker. We'll introduce the speakers in a minute. Then we have a masterclass 2, entrepreneurial skills and how to teach entrepreneurship. That all has to do, of course, with entrepreneurial education at universities. But in this case, that will be 2 best practices from 2 Amsterdam universities, a minor and a master curriculum on entrepreneurship. And then we have the 2 days of experiential learning. Experiential learning. And the idea there is that you teachers or people being involved in development of the entrepreneurship education will go from idea to business concept using, let's say, modern entrepreneurship tools. And that's really interactive and active. And that would mean that you really go out of that building, go out of the comfort zone, and learn by doing, and also reflect on this. So that's the whole program very, very shortly. Today we have Masterclass 1 with the 2 subjects mentioned. The first speaker we will have before a break, of course, is Mr. Todd Davey. He is working very internationally. As you can see, he's associate professor in Paris, but also a regular visiting researcher at different universities. Todd is originally from Australia, and he will handle the topic entrepreneurial education at universities. And then we have our second speaker, Marco van Gelder, who is from the Netherlands and associate professor at the VU University in Amsterdam. He's a business psychologist specialized in teaching entrepreneurial competencies, not only in a business environment, but more broadly. So these 2 speakers will come soon, but before that, we will go into breakout rooms. And we have speed intros and sharing students' expectations there, meaning that we have chairpersons in the room. They have already been appointed or kindly asked to be the chairperson in that breakout room, so you don't have to discuss that. Who will the chairperson? Chairperson will guard the process and the time, because we don't have a lot of time. It must be guarded. So there is 1.5 minutes per person. Of course, if instead of 5, maybe you are with 3 in the room, you have maybe 2 minutes. And the participant will do a very short personal introduction, name, faculty, division, interest maybe, and then you move on to the next subject within that 1.5 minutes, namely the next 4 students' expectations. So please share 4 students' expectations as a participant that you think are most important or maybe very unexpected or surprising. You share that in the group. Then within the breakout room, there is a room's choice of 4 expectations translated into 4 keywords. So each room will have 4 main expectations, or most important or most surprising ones. They will be translated in a keyword And these 4 expectations, or these 4 keywords, I must say, will be entered in a Mentimeter by the chairperson. So you don't have to do anything there as a participant. And then later on, when we are back in the main room, we will have a word cloud of all these keywords. That's the whole idea. And there is a time pressure, of course. There is a total time of 16 minutes. I think we are ready to go into the breakout room. Stefan is the one who will put you there. So you will be notified if before the room closes again. So let's go to the breakout rooms.
Hey guys, hello from my side. I'm just bringing you to the breakout rooms. It will take just 1 minute.
That'll be good to know.
I was really speaking with my team, and I find myself here.
Yeah, okay. You've all been brought back to the main session. So hopefully you like that exercise. It's always a bit, you get into breakout rooms and then you get kind of pushed back out into the main session. But that's what happens. But hopefully you get a good chance to connect, which was the main purpose for this particular exercise, right? So if you haven't done so in your group, please go to the Mentimeter. So the chair people should know what the Mentimeter is and have the details for that. And I can actually share my screen, because it's on the other side of my computer, which is basically where the Mentimeter is. And you'll find it here. So you can see, and I hope you all do, all of the keywords that are being entered at the moment. So this is a live update of the things you put into the to the system. So if you haven't done so, and you are a chairperson, please keep adding this this system with your terms, so with your keywords. And obviously, it's a bit hard to find common themes here, because there's a lot of different words popping up. So this is an overview that we'll create anyway for you guys to have a look at. And I think it will be interesting to see mentoring case studies. Risk management came into our session as well. Competencies, proactive mindset. Now, those are all terms and keywords that we associate as well with entrepreneurship. So it's fantastic to see that that you think about those things in the same kind of way. So now we can build on this, obviously, and for that I'll hand back over to Bart, because our speakers will actually, and I'll stop sharing my screen here. Our speakers will actually also engage a little bit with you guys in the obviously the content, to give you a bit of a background of what they are planning to do and what their philosophy and methods are. So Bart, if you come back in, you can take over and introduce the first speaker.
Sure, thank you very much, Arjen. Regarding the expectations, quite a few of the participants have filled in the questionnaire with expectations of students also, and we will integrate these keywords we collected now together with the questionnaires, and we will share that later in the process, but not during this masterclass. Here we are for the speakers. So we are about to move to our first speaker. I would love to introduce him, Mr. Todd Davey from Australia, working all over the world and especially in Europe now. Todd, yeah, you already took over the screen. Great. The floor and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and the warm welcome, and especially to Preneurz for the invitation to speak and share some understanding of entrepreneurship education with you all today. Really quickly into my background, keeping in mind I have 20 minutes, so not a lot of time. But I've had over 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship. I was involved as the head of strategy and business development in one of the fastest growing companies in Asia Pacific between 2003 and 2006. We were subsequently bought out, but at some point in that process, I decided that I wanted to make a step into academia. So now I have a foot in the entrepreneurship world, and I have a foot firmly in the academic world. And for the last 14 years, I've been teaching the topic of entrepreneurship. Currently, I'm the Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship at the Institut Mines-Télécom Business School in France. And the program that I'm responsible for is called the SEED program, which is a one-year internship that students spend in their own company. And at the same time, they intern in the campus incubator that is set up to support entrepreneurship. That's just a really quick introduction. What I'm going to be talking about today is the basis for providing entrepreneurship education. So revisiting, if you like, the basics, or in this case, setting the foundation for a solid entrepreneurship education program. And we're going to be addressing the topics of who, what, and how. Now, the first topic is who. And what I really want to challenge you all to do is to think about really clearly who it is you're addressing. Now, what you can see on the slide is actually it's intentionally in German. So some of you may understand it if you speak German, but it's intentionally in German because it was taken from Unternehmertum, which is a startup incubator that is based in Munich, working together with, or fully owned by, the Technical University of Munich. And this is their screenshot from 2015, and it just showed really clearly the different stakeholders that they identified that they were providing services to. Now, maybe as an educator, you don't perceive that you're providing a service, but just as you did the interviews with the with the students, we need to see our different target groups as our customers. And in that respect, we are providing a service. Now, here are the options of, generally speaking, of what a university might offer and who that might offer to. It can be student entrepreneurial behaviour. That's usually a starting point. So actually encouraging entrepreneurial activity or entrepreneurial thinking and acting. We can approach scientists or academics with the topic of entrepreneurship. We can more wholeheartedly focus on those who are interested in actually starting a company, those that we would call starters. So they're ready to do something, or they're interested in taking a concept forward. We can focus on providing educational entrepreneurship education to professionals. So that could be in a master program or an MBA. And also we can provide our services as a university and educational modules to growth businesses. And I thought they captured this really, really succinctly and well in this slide. So again, just to revisit, be really clear about who you are providing the knowledge to and what is their basic understanding of business and entrepreneurship. The next thing that I wanted to show you was to talk about the concept of what. And this is conceptually, I'll show you in reality in a second, but this is conceptually how we might offer entrepreneurship education at universities. What you can see on the left-hand side is the scale of entrepreneurship knowledge from very basic to expert. And what you can also see on the bottom axis is the focus. So are we focusing on developing mindset or a life approach? Are we focused on the activity of creating a startup, or we focus more wholeheartedly on scale up? Now, there is a difference in colour that I've created in this slide, and that is designed to just show you that the light blue is usually where we as educators in an entrepreneurship in a university, that's where we tend to focus, is on the stages, the first, second and third stages, which is entrepreneurship thinking and acting. And that is usually focused on a basic level of understanding of entrepreneurship knowledge, and then at a mindset level. We focus also on the pre-incubation phase of developing a startup, so prior to considering the activity of actually creating a company. And then also making a step into the incubation phase, which is supporting, whether it's students, scientists, or even those in your community, to create a startup. So we are going to stay focused on that for the discussions in the second part of this presentation. But just to give you a framework that you can use and to be really clear about who you are focusing on along the dimensions of what level of entrepreneurial knowledge do they have, and then what sort of focus are we going to have? Is it going to just be on thinking and acting? Is it going to be more proactively on starting a company, or is it going to be more focused on the growth phase? Now, what you might also want to consider is that in many respects, especially if you're developing a new program at a university, is that often we have to work very hard on the demand side of the equation when it comes to entrepreneurship programs. In other words, we need to work hard on developing and inspiring students to want to study entrepreneurship and to clearly communicate what is entrepreneurship. Now, that can be quite a challenge, but if we are going to get entrepreneurial programs off the ground, we firstly need to inspire this demand. Anything beyond the, as we move into pre-incubation and the incubation phase, then often we're dealing much more with the supply of the programs as opposed to demand. But I think it's something I've experienced a number of times in the different locations that I've created an entrepreneurship program, is that you first need to inspire demand for your programs before you then start creating all different programs. So get that focus. A second thing that I think is really important to observe is that make sure that your ambitions match the resources that you've got access to. I have to admit, when I first arrived in Germany and started teaching at the Münster University of Applied Sciences, my ambitions exceeded the access that I had to resources, and upon initially tried to create a number of different programs, I had to scale it back to just create a really solid, iconic program so that I could get traction within the university to get access to these resources. So just make sure your ambitions match the resources that you've got, and don't get too carried away. So anyway, that's the conception. That's how it conceptually looks. Unfortunately, just like entrepreneurship, though, it's much messier than that. And something that is focused on entrepreneurial thinking and acting can probably take place in a basic or an expert environment. But as much as anything, you can also see pre-incubation programs overlapping incubation programs, overlapping accelerator programs, and then scale-up programs. So in reality, it's a lot messier than it might first seem. So just keep that in mind. It's the way it is. I think it's really important also to reflect on the how. And there's a couple of points I wanted to make about the how. And I'm not going to talk at depth about this model. There are a number of different models about entrepreneurial thinking and acting, or entrepreneurial mindsets. This is the model that's been created within a European program. It's pushed and it's an area of focus for the European Commission, and it's called Entrecomp. And it's the European Entrepreneurship Competence Framework. If you're looking for a starting point to identify the sort of competencies, outcomes that you want to bring to your students through entrepreneurship education, I would recommend highly that you go and search for Entrecomp. There are a number of different tools, really extensive amount of tools that you can utilise. I think it also provides a really clear focus on the entrepreneurial competencies and masteries that an entrepreneurial student might seek, or that we might try to inspire in our education. Now, there's three main foci, and that includes ideas and opportunities, resources, and then into action. But again, I won't introduce that model here because of the time limits that we have. I want to focus on a few examples, but this is some model that you can refer to if you're looking to really try to understand what sort of competencies you're trying to inspire in your students. And I heard discussions about those in the breakout rooms, but then also how you can inspire those different competencies. Two further concepts I wanted to get across in respect to the how is there are a number of forms of learning. Now, I've got at point 7 the traditional learning styles, which is seminar style sessions, as well as masterclasses, etc. But I wanted to also communicate to all of you that for entrepreneurship education, as Preneurz introduced at the start of the program, there's a lot of focus on learning by doing and other pedagogies, other ways in which we might be able to educate around entrepreneurship. And the first one, as I mentioned, is applied learning, which is learning by doing, and it features the participants actually learning through their own action, and then engaging in a self-reflection exercise, which is where we go to point 2, self-learning. In other words, students are reflecting on their own actions in order to learn the concepts of entrepreneurship. They can also have feedback from their peers, and that's where we come to point 3 in terms of inspiring peer learning. Now, this is a concept that is fully and wholeheartedly embraced by a great program out of Finland called Team Academy. And they have a really structured program for inspiring students to learn from each other. So there's a lot of focus in their program on peer learning. They can learn through case studies. That's a more traditional way of educating. And it's equally valid for entrepreneurship, although entrepreneurship is so fast moving that cases can quickly become redundant. You need to keep that in context. Blended learning is something that I'm sure you're aware of and you're grappling with or trying to understand how to get the best out of at the moment. I won't go into that too much, but online and offline combined. And then gamification as a way of learning. And there are a number of really cool programs involving share price for developing concepts and updating that weekly depending on what the students do. And then, as I mentioned, there's the traditional learning styles. Just wanted to quickly touch on the principles before we go into some examples, some really concrete examples. And 2 of the major sources of inspiration for the principles that you, if you're not already aware of, look into them. And the first one is design thinking. And some of the key principles from design thinking include being people-centered, so and actually moving away from the idea as the focus of the student, their business idea or business concept, but actually moving on to the people, as in what is it that the customers are looking for and what sort of problems are they facing. Embracing, and I heard this in the discussion just before this presentation, and it was a really important insight by students that they were interested in failure. Now, this is something specifically that I encountered in Germany, was this attitude to failure, and that if you fail in a company, then you are a failure. And I think it's really important to understand what your students think and also to frame failure in a way that is a positive. In other words, it's a way of learning as long as we learn the lesson. Show, don't tell is a common aspect of design thinking, which means rather than trying to explain something, why don't you create something so somebody can touch and feel and experience it. And then the concept of getting out of the building, in other words, going and speaking with those who are in the industry, who are undertaking entrepreneurship, or customers, partners, etc. The second concept is in relation to the lean startup. And again, this is a concept that is wholeheartedly embraced in the entrepreneurship scene. And it revolves around students actually measuring the response that they get to whatever they've built. So the prototype, testing it, getting that the measurements and seeing what sort of reaction they get, and then learning. And that is incorporated into these short iterative learning styles. And that is something that is really core to teaching entrepreneurship, is actually putting students in a position where they experience something. Maybe it's failure, maybe it's negative feedback, but they get the opportunity to learn and then iterate that learning into a move forward. So taking something forward through these iterative learning cycles. Just to be clear as well, though, for those teaching management, that entrepreneurship is not separated from management. It's not a completely different discipline. It is very overlapping, and I think you can still draw upon management theories and tools and methods, but just be aware that there's a distinct entrepreneurship component. And then the concept of working in sprints. So I think these sort of concepts are really embraced in the lean startup. So let's go back to our framework for entrepreneurship education, and I just want to bring in some examples of what sort of programs you could offer. Now, these are actual programs I'll be introducing, but they are, I'd say, generic, so that you get a bit of an understanding of what they include. And we're going to use our model from previously to give it a bit more detail. I'm going to focus specifically on this first set. So at a very basic level, we have entrepreneurship courses, as well as challenges, we call them. And that's focused more on the mindset. But as we move more towards creating a startup or creating a new venture, we might look at business plan competitions or hackathons. As we get on a higher level of entrepreneurship knowledge, we might move into an entrepreneurship minor or explore entrepreneurship for MBA and master classes or master courses. But if we go more in the direction of startup, we might focus more on boot camps, pre-incubation programs, or even an incubation program, which takes you into creating a startup. One thing that is common with most of these programs is a concept called pitching competitions, which is it can be incorporated into these programs or it can be separate. And it's basically where students, however you define your students, but students are getting up in front of, whether it's a community or if it's a set of judges, and they're pitching their concept in a competition style format. Acceleration startup growth is not something we necessarily focus on as universities. Some universities do, but most don't. And there are these days very well developed structures in place by private companies as well as government supported organisations to create acceleration and these scale up growth phase. One thing I did want to point out, though, is that some universities do offer programs which relate to actually providing funding for startups, but also for existing companies offering such a thing called a challenge project, offering entrepreneurship courses, or in fact focusing on corporate venturing. So that this is something, when you get more developed, that you might also consider offering. But just to now give you some concrete examples before I finish, I wanted to just give you 3 different concepts just quickly. I won't go through each of the different points. This is something you can refer to in the slides when you are provided to those later. But the first one is in respect to Entrepreneurship 101, so a typical starter program for entrepreneurship. It tends to be a 3 to 6 ECTS program. It's a semester long and it's in curricula, and it deals with quite typical topics around innovation management, design thinking, finances, legal issues, team building, marketing, sales, etc. Another type of program which we see, which feeds into this developing entrepreneurial mindsets, is a program which is an ideation program. So idea to prototype. It can be done across an entire semester, but often it's done as a 3-day or 25-hour sort of sprint. And often it's also done as an extracurricular. It identifies and uses concepts which are really focused on creativity, design thinking, and idea generation through to creating a prototype in a very short period of time. And then you see programs such as those hosted by Unternehmertum in Germany, which is the 3 ECTS program, 1 semester in curricula, but it's a business plan program. And in this case, students are stepping through the different elements of a concept. They might not necessarily be going, they may or may not be going out and speaking to customers. Ideally they would, but this program has a very clear structure around understanding customer needs, solution and prototyping, understanding the market, then the business model, and finally the pitching training. So I think they're very common type structures, 3 different type programs that you may want to consider as a starting point. The assessments are usually around offered through assignments. Maybe it's through the pitch that the student groups or teams make at the end of the program, or through the business plan or concept that they articulate. And often another way of getting into entrepreneurship education is also to offer a hackathon. Now, originally it was hackathons were focused on coding, but it's not necessarily these days just about coding. And it effectively is a 1 to 3 day design sprint, which is aimed to solve a specific problem or a challenge or problem that exists. The teams consist of students, maybe data scientists, designers, developers, entrepreneurs. You can bring quite a range of different backgrounds into a mix. And they're just, generally speaking, they're developing new concepts, solving social problems, or it can also be for companies where they're looking for new concepts or solving their own problems. Generally, each hackathon has a theme, and it can be, for example, Internet of Things, energy utilization, e-security. There's a range of different topics. But effectively, these hackathons are a testing ground for new ideas, and a very intense sprint is designed to bring them together in a very short period of time. And I've given a typical calendar there, and this example comes from the example of Slash, which is at Code University in University of Applied Sciences in Germany. But again, you can refer to the more detail in the slides when we get to it. Another type of program which is similar in nature to a hackathon, but focused much more has a much more social focus, is a thing called a challenge project. Now, what is a challenge project? Well, again, we have this diversified understanding of what a student is. It could be bachelor, master, PhD, academics. You can bring industry into it. You can bring social actors, groups into the mix as well, should you wish. But effectively, they're acting as consultants to solve a city or a regional issue. So it very much has this social focus. But the program is indeed run by the university. It's underpinned usually by a design thinking methodology. And really the focus is on getting a problem and solution fit. So in other words, trying to understand what is the problem they're addressing and then what sort of solutions can exist. There are a number of different elements such as seminars, masterclasses, workshops. Maybe there's site visits, there's interaction with mentors, an online system, as well as tools that you're supplied. And it can be done over a range of formats, 2 to 3 days, semester long, summer school, etc. That's something that we've run at the Institut Mines-Télécom Business School. We've done it in all formats, 2 to 3 days, semester long, summer school. And we've done it in a number of different formats, and we did it, and we called it the Urban Challenge. I did mention that pitching competitions can be a really effective way of getting not only the entrepreneurship topic on the agenda of the university, but it can get, and this is really important, is to help to build demand. I mentioned earlier, it's really important not just to focus on supplying entrepreneurship education, but to build interest and fascination with the topic. Now, this one in particular, I think, is a fantastic example out of Finland. Some great examples out of Finland. This one's called Polar Bear Pitching, and it's a business idea pitching competition. It's actually features on local television and is on radio. It's run by the University of Oulu, and it's designed to promote the topic of entrepreneurship. Now, the concept is that you can basically pitch for as long as you like, as long as you can stand the cold water. Which, again, I think it's a fantastic concept to build awareness, to build interest in the topic of entrepreneurship, and there's prizes for winners, and it's really helped to raise the profile of entrepreneurship. So maybe look to do something like that. Another concept that I've seen out of the Netherlands, which is In the Ring, and that's run by Erasmus University, but there are a number of different programs which seek to do this. An example I just wanted to give you is into pre-incubation. is the 10K program out of Amsterdam, and it's run by Hogeschool van Amsterdam. And I don't necessarily focus on them particularly, even though I think they do a good job with it. It's just more that the way that they structure the program is quite a typical way of offering a pre-incubation program. It starts with a kick-off night, a bit of fun, maybe a few, well, I don't know if you can offer it, but a few drinks in a neutral environment. It then has an intensive 1-week masterclass, or there's a series of masterclasses running over a period of time. There's supported by coaching and mentoring. And then there's this Dragon's Den type pitch night. In other words, there's students put on stage, lights, cameras, and judges with an audience, and they're put under pressure to present their idea. And this, you can also have a sustainable development focus on that, and that's often what they do with this program. The final example I wanted to give you is, I just thought, well, this is a bit more radical, and this is also coming out of Amsterdam, and this is the Amsterdam Startup Village, and one of the coordinators of this program being offered in Albania is actually the former chief of this, or oversaw this startup village. But so you can get more ideas from him, but at the same time, I think it's a really effective example of doing more with less. So in other words, getting access to a series of shipping containers, which were required, as I understand it, for no cost. And through that, acquiring a piece of land on campus, so securing, should I say, a piece of land on campus, and then developing a really iconic location for where entrepreneurship occurs. It doubles as not only a home for and an incubation location for startups, but it also doubles as being really iconic and draw card of bringing people from the campus into that environment, to this entrepreneurial environment. And I think that's really important. The final thing I wanted to say about the how, and I think it's important to really be a bit strategic when you're developing entrepreneurship at universities, and that is to understand what is the top level, or what is the level of acceptance of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial concepts within your organisation. Is it very isolated, so it's on a professor by professor basis, or is there some support for entrepreneurship concepts coming from the top of the organisation, the board, and to what degree across the organisation is that occurring through a number of faculties, or is it isolated faculties? Because if we're moving to the concept of the entrepreneurial university, we can take a bottom-up approach, and that's what many of us often do. We can also take a top-down approach, and that's what some universities do, by starting with an entrepreneurial rector and then trying to bring the topic of entrepreneurship to the table. My experience is it's best to do both, but if you have a preference, a bottom-up approach can work really well, especially if you can get student support, which is what Aalto University did very, very well when they were developing their entrepreneurship program. So just to wrap up, we touched on the who, the what, and how. I want to strongly emphasise to all of you that don't underestimate how important it is to be clear about those respective aspects. Be really clear about what it is that you're offering to whom and how you're going to offer it, because all of that has a meaning. And then finally, I just wanted to give you some final tips, because I've been in this game a long time now, and I just wanted to give you some final thoughts from my perspective, and that is, when it comes to entrepreneurship education, find any way possible to bring it into your being, into the university. It can be a simple pedagogy. For example, we created a pedagogy within a subject where we just said, all right, you're going to make somebody's day today. So we created a competition about make someone's day. And what we want to do is give the student the feeling of creating something, of doing something, of making a difference, which is a core part of being an entrepreneur. Curricular-bound modules, courses, try to find ways of doing that, but if not, extracurricular is also more than fine, and in some ways it might also be a better approach. Understand your student interests, understand how interested are they in employment versus their own company, because that's going to be a barrier to get interest in entrepreneurship programs, as well as understand what is their attitude to risk and failure. Do they believe that if they fail in company, they are a failure? And to what degree are they willing to take a risk? Because that can be a major inhibitor to getting interest in entrepreneurship programs. Be visible and easy to recognize. So really brand your programs and promote your activities through PR. So really get some noise and some visuals around what you're doing. Try to, over time, develop an an ecosystem. So that means identifying other educators, identifying interested students, trying to develop networking in the topic of entrepreneurship so that you can identify like-minded others. And then the final two tips is offer really good coffee and then bring your energy into the program. Really make it fun, because you are the driver of what the students are doing. And also you're really a conduit of that energy which entrepreneurship possesses, and try to bring that into your program and make it fun for the students. So hopefully I've met the timeline. It was quite a tight time frame, and it was an interesting brief, but more than happy to answer questions if there's time. But again, thank you to Preneurz for the invitation to present today.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, there was a time pressure, and you felt it. I understand, and also we had a bit of a slow start of it with the breakout rooms. So, but thank you very much for a lot of information, a lot of inspiration, a lot of organizations, programs that we can dive into internationally, and nice for us. Also examples from Amsterdam. Thank you for that. We go to the Q&A very shortly before we have a very short break. Eric.
Yeah, thank you very much, Todd, for your introduction. Erik Boer here. There's a couple of questions coming in. One I think is very interesting. I'm very curious to hear your view on it. It's someone is asking if you're in a public university and it still has a low level of entrepreneurship. Where do you start? Give some references where to start, also in relation to your difference between bottom-up and top-down approach.
No, it's a really important question, and it can be challenging to bring the concept of entrepreneurship into a public university. I would try to understand, for example, if we've talked about bottom-up versus top-down, try to understand the attitude of senior members of the university, if you have access to them, to what is their attitude to entrepreneurship. I found that this was 10 years ago, within a German context, I won't mention the university, but I had to change my language. I had to avoid using the topic of entrepreneurship because there was resistance to the topic of entrepreneurship within the university. Unternehmensgründung in German means starting a company, and they said, no, that's not what we do. So I changed the language away from entrepreneurship to innovation. I said, oh, well, then we have the topic of innovation that we can develop. And they were like, oh, yes, we're innovative. Yes, we're interested in innovation. And the students can be innovative in terms of creating something and maybe even bring it to market. Oh, yes, we do innovation. So what I would say is try to find out the attitudes. You'll quickly discover when you mention the topic of entrepreneurship, whether they like it or not. If you're not getting a warm reception, pivot and go in the direction of maybe introducing the topic of innovation. Oh yes, innovation is very important. And maybe also touch on the nature of, perhaps that you will be creating an impact for society and for the local region. That can be a really important point to bring to those that have power, as well as just trying to find a way of bringing it into your program. And that's where we talk about the bottom-up approach, and that is by stealth or however you think you can do it. There were a couple of programs I didn't introduce which relate to how an entrepreneurship program was brought into a marketing degree. And the students were asked to do a marketing plan for a new discovery from research. So in other words, what we decided to do was basically get the students to help researchers to commercialize their research. Now, that got a much better response from the head of the school, because all of a sudden we were contributing back to the school in terms of getting the research out into the world. So what I'd say is that find what is interesting to the powers that be. If you want a top-down approach, it can be much easier to do top-down because you get buy-in easily. But a bottom-up approach is just try to find a way of bringing it into any curricula, or offer extracurricular, and I gave us a few examples there, whether they're, a boot camp, create a company in 24 hours, whether it's, maybe even you create some sort of challenge, as I said. So some of these smaller examples, which are not too time intensive and don't take away from your other activities, is what I would say. But just final advice is try to be visual. Try to get some noise and try to get some attention. And even if it means moving away from the topic of entrepreneurship into innovation, then you can do it by stealth.
Yeah. Thank you, Bart. There are a lot of questions coming in, but you said that I have space for 2.
Well, yeah, we were really running out of time. So if you can,
okay,
of course,
let me do one more then here.
Yeah, with a short answer, please. Sorry, Todd.
Which I find
okay, I'll give it one word advice.
The key word.
Well, I'm not sure if you're going to manage. I find it an interesting question. Well, also thank you for the presentation. Someone is very much in favor of good coffee advice, but that's not the question. The question is about assessing an entrepreneurial program. How do you assess a program, and especially in terms of metrics? What kind of metrics you can use to assess a program?
Yeah, it's a really important point if you want to bring it in as part of a curricula. And we've created different rubrics, rubrics meaning the definition of the assessment framework. We've created a number of rubrics, which I'm happy to share with others around, for example, business concept, not so much you can do it around a business plan, so the student create an entire business plan, but more around shaping up the concept into a specific opportunity document. So we've got a rubric for that, so how to assess that. Also around the pitching part of the assessment, we have a rubric for that about how to assess that. And there's also, depending on what you're offering and which direction you're going, it could be that you're also assessing assignments that they're submitting. So, for example, interviews with entrepreneurs, and they reflect on that. Self-reflection documents is something you can do. Again, I'm happy to provide you with the rubric of how we assess those sort of things. But as long as you've got a clear rubric, that's what I call it, but basically it's a structure for assessing. As long as you've got that clear, and then usually it's accepted by academic institutions. And what I would say is that you can be quite creative within that framework and within the restrictions of the curricula and also the accreditation structures. You can be quite creative within that.
And are you willing to share this rubric, Todd? Is the question that I get in now.
Sure.
Are you willing to share?
There's a number of different rubrics we have. Yes, I'm happy to share the presentation rubrics. Okay. Further advice, happy to do that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Okay, Bart. Yeah, well, there are more questions coming in, but I'm not allowed to ask more, right?
I'm so sorry. I hate it myself. I would love to do that, but we have a kind of pressure cooker program. Still another speaker coming up, and we really need a break. We take a break instead of 15 minutes. We take only 5 minutes break, and then we will move on with the next speaker. And if anyone, the next speaker will be done before 7. So I hope the whole program we still manage before 7. Okay, 5 minutes break, please. Max 5 minutes. We have a second inspirational speaker right now. That's Mr. Marco van Gelderen. He's a business psychologist and he knows everything about training entrepreneurship, also not in a business environment. Marco, very welcome. Sorry we're a little late, but you were also attending the other speaker, I guess. The screen is yours and the mic also. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Let me bring up my materials. Yep. So, name of the presentation, Developing Enterprising Competencies in Daily Life. And yeah, I'm based at VU University or Free University Amsterdam. A few words about myself. I'm indeed, as Bart said, specialized in the training of entrepreneurial or enterprising competencies. I have a website, enterprisingcompetencies.com, where I've collected some materials about various competencies. The format I'm talking about today, I've been teaching at a number of places in Europe. This is on the bottom left. So Germany, Austria, Finland, in a number of places. They're still using my formats also after I ceased to work there. So at Aalto University was mentioned by Todd, and also at Turku University and in Pori. And in Russia, so I also worked for St. Petersburg Polytechnical University. And in New Zealand I've worked. I'm also research active. I'm a board member of these journals. And I'm also an action editor of the Entrepreneurship and Education and Pedagogy Journal, which is a teaching journal about entrepreneurship. And I'm an editor of the Learning Innovation section. So actually this is another tip to go to a journal like this and have a look at what is published, because there are a lot of interesting formats there. Another journal I would recommend is Education Plus Training. So that was a little bit about me. The good thing about these online meetings is that you can work the presentations of the previous speakers into your own presentation. So you may recognize this slide. Thanks, Todd. So whereas Todd gave a broad overview, I'm really giving one specific example, and this is squarely in the entrepreneurial thinking and acting mindset life approach with basic knowledge of entrepreneurship needed. That's where this is situated. The quest that I was facing was how to stimulate an entrepreneurial mindset of young people. So pre-experienced students, not students running a business yet. Young people, many people have asked this, for example, the World Economic Forum, because many young people do not yet own a business, and many may not even aspire to start one or own one, but they still may want to be more entrepreneurial. And my solution is to decouple entrepreneurial behavior from starting or running a venture. Hence the title of the presentation, Practicing Entrepreneurial or Enterprising Competencies in Daily Life. And what is my format? I also like this word challenges, just like Todd, probably because entrepreneurship educators like to challenge their students. But what I do is I give the students, teams of students, 8 to 10 so-called challenges, which they need to tackle in just 1 or 2 days time, and I'm not present. And what sort of challenges are we talking about? For example, link to people or groups of people who do not know each other before, did not know each other before, meaningfully together in a way that creates value for them both. Or provide an unforgettable experience for someone in need, e.g. someone ill, poor, lonely, homeless, bored, but not a fellow student. A third one, get invited for coffee or tea at the home of a VIP of a township or community with 3,000 inhabitants or fewer. And if you're in the city, then this can also be a sub-community in the city. And I give them 8 or 10 of these challenges, and they're not revealed beforehand. So the students do not know what is coming at them. And it seems really like a lot to them to engage with. So the underlying pedagogical model is a comfort zone model. I'm trying to push them out of their comfort zone by giving this really large amount of challenges to deal with, to make the most of in just 1 day or 2 days time, to get them in the so-called grown or growth zone and to help them expand their comfort zone. And hopefully they don't get into the panic zone, because then you retreat into the comfort zone. But let me not go into these things in detail, given the limited time I have. What are the competencies that are covered by this specific format? There are 6. Generating ideas for opportunities, taking action, perseverance, networking, or using your network, teamwork, working together, and convincing people. And these are also, thanks Todd, he mentioned the Entrecom, so I just pasted this picture also in my presentation. These are also competencies that are part of the Entrecom framework. And although these competencies are individual, I think they underlie any successful venturing activities. If you don't have these individual level skills, it's very hard to be a successful business starter or owner. So these challenges, they tap into these 6 competencies. Each of the challenges force you to use all 6 of them. And all the challenges use simple, everyday, mundane activities, like connecting people, helping people, expressing curiosity, organizing someone, inviting someone, taking part, or offering someone to take part, sharing, as opportunities to create value. So I'm really focused on creation of value, not so much the appropriation of value. It's not about getting a profit. It's more about having a learning experience and creating value. And I use these simple, everyday, mundane activities because then there are no limits or barriers to take part. Everyone can take part, and it's cheap because these opportunities are all around us. So this can also be done in a resource-constrained environment. These enterprising competencies are in service of what I call enterprising behavior. What is this behavior? It's behavior that is characterized by these, but not necessarily all attributes. Firstly, the possibility of failure. I made it red because of Todd's presentation. So because there are so many challenges that are difficult, particularly with so many in such a short time, students may fail. And so there's an element of risk, and it requires courage or boldness. Enterprising behavior is about proactiveness, taking initiative. It's about novelty and about autonomy, all in the context of the creation of value. So you can say that this enterprising behavior, I like the term enterprising because it goes beyond just the venture level or the business, occurs in many ways, not just starting a business. So starting a business is a special case of enterprising behavior, you may say. How does this work practically? So the instruction is part of the instruction. Students cannot prepare. The challenges are kept secret. This is very important because if they can prepare, they learn less. It's a comfort zone model. And they are handed out in the morning of the first fieldwork day. The students get out of the building, so you don't do this on campus. You go into the city or into the countryside. They are instructed to engage with the challenges in the most enterprising way possible. So it's really not about ticking the boxes. And teams are allowed to change or combine challenges as long as it promotes enterprising behavior. So they have a lot of freedom to fill in their activities in the way they want, as long as it's in service of enterprising behavior. Teams, I typically make of 4 students. Teamwork is one of the competencies. So this is a reason to work in teams. And I like to work with young people. So this is bachelor, master, can be at any level, I think. University, vocational, could even be high school students. I tend to mix the international students and the domestic students because of language issues. And the lecturer does not participate. He unexpectedly or she unexpectedly disappears after handing out the challenges in the morning of the first day. So this contributes to the out of comfort zone experience. And the teams are formed by the lecturer because you want to practice networking and network utilization. So you don't want teams to form themselves based on friendships. After the 1 or 2 days that the students engage with these challenges, there are presentations. And this is done. I like the students to watch each other. There can be a competition for most enterprising team or not, whatever you like, but I like the students to watch the others because you can learn from the others. And also some teams show a minimalistic performance, but they show signs of regret when they're watching the teams that had the most fun. So it's an experiential format. It's about learning by doing. It's learning by doing. But it's important to realize that in learning by doing, the doing is not an aim in itself. So this is Michael Jordan with the statement, I'm not out there sweating for 3 hours every day. He's meaning the training, just to find out what it feels like to sweat. You want to have the experience, but you want to learn from experience as well. In relation to this, the goals of the format is the study and practice of enterprising competencies. So firstly, to acquire knowledge with regard to enterprising competencies. And secondly, to develop insight into and development of your own enterprising competencies. With regard to the knowledge component, The reflections incorporate literature that can be found on my website, enterprisingcompetencies.com, where for each of these competencies there's an overview of current theory and empirical research. So this would be a short format schedule. So I would typically spend some time on these competencies, 2 days, then have 2 days of the fieldwork, the action learning, and then the presentations. And then 1 week later, now I come back again to the learning by doing, but also learning from doing, is to provide a reflection report. And this is the way that the students are assessed, by means of individual reflections. Students analyze why they behaved as they did. What are the situational and personal influences on your behavior? And given what you learned during the days, what are your plans to develop your skills or competencies further? They're asked to incorporate the literature, but still it's important that they keep their own voice. And I think in this way you have a sort of best of both worlds, because you have team assignments, but individual assessment. So your grade, even if your teammates disappoint you, you can still have a high grade if you submit a high quality reflection. How do I grade this? I've listed here the grade form. These are a lot of words, but 3 things are important. One is effort. So to what extent did the team or the persons put themselves out there? Reflection on their competencies and application of the literature, that's another 40%, and this plan for further development. What are the sort of things that students learn? These are a number of examples. One is opportunities for value creation are everywhere and every day if you're alert, because the challenges all ask the students to create value out of nowhere, it seems. But once you start looking for opportunities to do so, there are actually quite a few. Surprisingly, many people say yes to requests, and that even applied in Russia, where I also taught this course. If people say no, it hurts less than expected. So this is an exposure model. The pain wears off if you get more, if you become more experienced to failure or rejection. That students are better able than thought to step out of their comfort zones. Another important thing that students realize that they are able to think on their feet and act on the go, because many of our university formats are about planning, thinking first, and then studying, writing, and such. But this is about learning by doing. That networks are really important, that diverse teams can be really productive. And also, they're sometimes surprised to realize how satisfying it can be if your initiatives work out, and that those who really try it had more fun. These are some examples. 2 slides remaining, so I'm well within time. It's very important to guard the surprise element, because if the students know in advance, they start to prepare and they start to guard against, let's say, this, the difficulty that they may encounter. And it's exactly the difficulty that brings the learning benefits. So I'm willing to share the challenges with you, but I'm not going to post all of them somewhere, because then the format is done. I took some examples here from YouTube, the marshmallow challenge, the spaghetti bridge challenge. They're very well-known exercises, but all that students need to do if they want to win a competition or fulfill the assignment is go to YouTube and see how it can be done. So I ask students not to share the design with future students or social media. If they do, I ask them to take it off, etc. So if you would ask me to share the format, then I will ask you to please keep it secret. In relation to some other formats that you will encounter, maybe Todd spoke about some, and also in part 2 of this workshop, get out of the building. So like Lean Startup, it involves direct contact with those for whom you attempt to create value. This is a similarity. It's clearly learning by doing. So to improvise, take action, think on your feet, rather than only plan and study. And effectuation, you may have heard of this theory, it's a popular theory. And this is clearly an exercise in effectuation because you proceed from your own means. The affordable loss is mainly social. You form partnerships because you work together with your network to get things done. And above all, you leverage contingencies or surprise. It's unexpected what will happen during this day or 2 days. So, but ultimately, the aim of the format is to build confidence. So this was something that really pleased me. This is a former student of mine on the right, and he emailed me this picture a couple of weeks after the course, and he said, I saw Bill Clinton walking on the streets of Amsterdam, and normally I wouldn't dare to do so, but I stopped my bicycle, I went off, and I asked the security guards if I could make a picture with him, and asked the guards if they could ask him, and they all thought it was a good idea. So here he is making a picture with Bill Clinton, and I checked actually in the newspaper whether the students was not cheating me, but actually Bill Clinton was in Amsterdam on that afternoon. So this is what it's aiming for. So thank you. I'm open for some questions if there is still time, and if you want to discuss this in a more extended way or help with implementation or whatever, you can contact me at this email address m.w.van.gelderen@vu.nl.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much, Marco. Great ending to see the proof of student making pictures with Bill Clinton as a proof of this method of entrepreneurial, or I must say enterprising behavior. I understand. I didn't know that. So that's what I take away. Thank you very much. Eric will have some questions from the chat. You were very well in time, so you made us all feel very comfortable again. We will have like 5 minutes for the questions, so we don't put a number to the questions, but to the time. Please, Eric.
I get a lot of questions coming in, Marco, so sit up straight. The first one is, can we approach you when we have questions or want to learn more about your methodology? But that you already answered in your last slide. People can email you, right, if they have questions?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if there was enough time to write down my email address, but it's maybe somewhere in the materials you provided, or otherwise, if you type in enterprising competencies and Marco van Gelderen, you will also find my email address somewhere.
Yeah.
We will share it.
First question is here, which I find quite interesting, is you have been teaching this methodology in different countries. Did the cultural differences have any effect on it? In other words, can you teach it everywhere, or are cultural differences also important here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you can. I think you can indeed teach it everywhere, but there are two things I like to say. The more a culture is low trust, and the more a culture is hierarchical and also not used that strangers approach you, the harder it is to do this. But also in such a context, the benefits can be enormous. So because the things that happen can be so unexpected that it actually makes a huge impact. While maybe in a culture where this is more normal, maybe the impact would be lower. So for example, in Russia, in response to this one of these challenges, so help make somebody happy or something, help someone in need, a group of Russian students decided to go to an orphanage. And they already expected to be turned down and that nobody would let them in and nobody wanted to speak to them and such. But much to their surprise, they were let in, and also to their surprise, the orphans were not cute 4-year-olds. They were actually 17-year-olds. They had never thought of the idea, neither had I, that orphans can also be older. but it was really interesting because the orphans were really interested in student life. So what is it like to study and how does that work and whatever. So they had a great afternoon with these with these or so-called orphans. And they really enjoyed that experience because it also, in fact, sort of it changed their perception of their sense of agency, that they were actually able to get some things done in spite of the culture maybe being more giving more constraints.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question is from someone who says that he or she is very interested in the topic of building confidence. Have been looking at some papers about shocks for young entrepreneurs and asking the question, what is your suggestion? Let the young creatives fail and restart from a possible failure, or somehow identify the possible shocks before happening? So I translated it, to what extent are you preparing students for the shocks they might encounter when they go out and do the challenges?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So this is about let's call it a scaffolding. So to what extent do I prepare the students for what is coming? The main preparation I have is with regard to teamwork, because we put a lot of students in teams but do not train them in how to make the most of teams. And I deliberately make the teams as diverse as possible. And the teamwork literature is very simple. The success of the team depends on the management of social processes in the team. It's all about communication. So in the reflection reports, if the teams run into difficulties, I want to know, what did you do to address these issues? How did you communicate with your team members? And this is something I really train in beforehand. So they don't know what they're going to do, but they know they get this sort of training because the team is very instrumental in doing these things successfully. Mm-hmm. So maybe in a more to give a more general answer, I think it's a mixture. You can do a bit of preparation, but to prepare students for mistakes doesn't give them the experience of making mistakes. So I think it's very important that things actually fail. And also another thing that students are surprised by sometimes is they present and then they do not present something that totally didn't work out, even though they spent half a day on it. And then I ask, what else did you do? And they mention this, or it comes up somehow, and they don't realize that this could actually be the most enterprising thing they did during the day or 2 days, because the success of the action you can't equate with being enterprising. It's much more enterprising to try something difficult and fail than to do something easy and succeed.
Yeah. Interesting. Bart, there's one more very interesting question. Can I still raise that?
Well, if the answer is very, very short.
Well, I don't know. That's up to Marco, but I think
okay,
it's
Marco, please give
question.
it very, very short, because otherwise we're gonna touch the 7.
I know. But okay. The question here is, you do evaluation at the end of the course, measuring the progress of enterprising behavior. To what extent do you start measuring this in the beginning of the course? So is it something you measure at the end of the course, or is there a sort of progressive measuring during the course?
I don't use measurements. I rely on reflection reports. And these reports tend to be quite personal. And if a student writes that the students had certain experiences and they reflect on their behavior and they notice some progress or lack of progress, I don't mind. I trust them to be able to see whether they were moving to a more skilled level. I can give them skills before and after, but is that going to help the student? I'm far more interested in to put them in a process and have them reflect on the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Bart?
Again, thank you very, very much, Marco. This was a pleasure for me. I hope for everybody. I see some people even applauding. Thank you very much. I'll move on to a closing word very shortly. Let me share this one, because what have we seen? Well, I'm not giving you a resume or a summary of what you have heard. Of course, we will share the slides. We will also give you a link to the YouTube of the recording, but we also will share the presentations. We also will share some literature and some links extra regarding the presentation, but also in general regarding entrepreneurship. Next time we are here in the program, so we will go into entrepreneurial skills and competences more on an individual level, on a reflection level, and how to teach entrepreneurship. I hope you had a great experience here. I want to ask Arjen to do the final closing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart, and thanks very much to all the speakers. I really enjoyed that session, and I hope you did too. I also hope that you are surprised, and a little bit shocked maybe to all the different ideas that came out there, because I think it's certainly different to normal teaching practices in universities, and I'll be very curious to hear your opinion about that. What we'll do next, and Bart already mentioned it in preparation for the next session, we'll come back to you with some information, obviously the presentations and some material as well on what to read. And we most likely will also ask you to reflect on this session and maybe have an assignment of some sorts to which you can apply the learnings that you've gained today. So we'll follow up on this session, and for now, I thank you, and on behalf of the whole team for your attention. And I can see everyone is still here. So I know it's late also in Albania, 7 o'clock. So I wish you a very pleasant evening and lovely dinner. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And you will receive an email for us over the next few days. So thanks very much.
Stefan needs to take the picture. Right?
Yes, give me the chance, guys. Before we all go for our diner, please show us make your camera on, show us your face, and then move your hands up and send us all your energy left, and we will all take the power from all of us into that evening and for the whole program. And thanks all to us. And I do not have to put down my hands to make the picture. So please stay here with your hands.
Stay.
Okay, keep up the hands. Keeping up the hands.
Woo! Yeah. Show.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.